Welcome everyone to the COVID and Environment and EJ workshop at CEJA's Congreso. I'm your MC, Ernesto Arevalo, with Communities for a Better Environment. And for this 1-hour interactive workshop, we'll explore how COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted EJ communities. Participants will learn how residents and organizations from across the state have organized and advocated for regional solutions. So now I will pass it off to Grecia.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Buenos días. My name is Grecia Lenes. I work for Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, and I'm really excited to be here with you all. Very honored to start off our workshop today. Very quickly, before we get into myself introducing some of my colleagues on the workshop, if you all could just in the chat box put in the organization, the location that where you're coming from, and also if you can answer this icebreaker of what has been your favorite food or dessert that you've made during this pandemic. I know I myself have experimented a lot more now that I'm home a lot, so would love to hear what everyone else is making at home, you know, whether it's new salad dressing, making ice cream, you know, whatever it is. Would love to hear, and recipes, if y'all have them, I would love to see them as well, because I would love to try them. So please put that in there. So the org that invited you, location, I think we see everyone's name, but yeah, and then your your new favorite food that you might have discovered now. So again, my name is Grecia. I am based, Leadership Council is a statewide nonprofit, but I'm actually based in our Fresno office, and folks will introduce themselves during the presentation. So I'll briefly introduce Jasmine Johnson, who's with Physicians for Social Responsibility based in LA. Tere Almaguer, who's with Poder, based in San Francisco. Tiffany Ng, with CEJA, based in Oakland. And lastly, we have Italia Garcia, who's with Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice, based in the Inland Empire. And so briefly, you know, as Ernesto mentioned, you know, today our workshop, we really want to learn about the impacts of COVID-19 on environmental justice, and especially how, you know, our response to the pandemic is really in line with a long part of our history of environmental racism against people that don't have many resources, you know, such as home, like the shelter-in-place order was very ironic for people, you know, especially for considering so many folks in California are housing insecure or maybe experiencing homelessness themselves. So we really want to dive deep into, you know, this historic racism that really is embedded in how COVID-19 has impacted certain communities. In addition, we hope that we can also share some of the best practices and empowering stories that you all have about your solutions to recovery that you have all been doing and been leading in your own communities. We want to know how have the power to change. We know that we have the power to change our outcomes, but the question is, how is it that we can, you know, really best organize to improve our health and communities? And again, we know the answer is within ourselves. So what are those solutions? And it's especially important because tomorrow during Congreso, there's going to be an awesome discussion around organizing to change our economic systems from an extractive system, which is really an extractive system of capitalism, to a regenerative one that uplifts everyone, and, you know, a system where everyone, you know, is hopefully at the table and really leading those discussions. We also hope that lastly, you know, through our discussions, we can continue building, you know, our strong connections. Normally do this in person in Sacramento during these events, but because we are, you know, we are unable to do that today, we want to continue to build those and learn from each other and learn from all of you as leaders by sharing your own organizing strategies and engaging in the problem solving together. So next we're going to have Jasmine and Tere do an awesome presentation on some of the impacts. We will then break out into about 4 or 5 breakout groups where we're going to go through 4 questions, or choose a couple of questions from a series of 4 questions, and we're going to kind of talk about it and then come back and hear about the discussion that happened in those breakout groups. And then finally, we're going to talk about some of the solutions and give more background on those solutions on COVID and EJ impacts. So I will hand it off to Jasmine and Tere.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grecia. So next slide, please. Thank you. So as Grecia started to explain, COVID-19 has had a number of disproportionate impacts on low-income communities and communities of color. And one of the more key and prevalent ways that we're seeing these are in the health impacts. So as you can see with some of the data here, Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and Asian people across the country have contracted the COVID-19 virus at disproportionately higher rates than white people. And additionally, some of the more granular data has shown even more unsettling facts, such as the fact that Latino people between the ages of 40 and 59 have been infected at 5 times the rate of white people in the same age group. And of Latino people who died, more than a quarter were younger than 60, compared to just 6% of white people who were that young. Additionally, Black and brown folks have been more greatly impacted by the economic fallout caused by the pandemic. So we're seeing that Latino women have experienced the steepest decline in employment, around 21% compared to just 13% for white women. And among men, Asian, Hispanic, and Black workers have experienced a greater loss than white workers as well, with job losses of 17%, 15%, and 13% respectively, compared to just 9% of white workers. Additionally, workers without any college education were more likely to have lost their jobs than workers with at least some college education. And we're seeing a decrease in employment that ranged from 6% among workers with a college degree to about 21% for workers without a high school diploma. Lastly, we also saw that folks who've been arbitrarily privileged to have been able to safely work from home, as Garcia sort of touched on. These have more often been non-Black and brown people and those with higher levels of educational attainment. We see that 37% of Asian Americans and 30% of whites said they could work remotely, but only 20% of African Americans and 6% of Latinos said that they were able to do that. Additionally, about 52% of folks with a college education or higher said they could work from home, but only 4% of those with less than a high school diploma said that they could. So just definitely something to note that some folks are definitely a lot safer, you know, despite whatever safer at home orders are in place right now. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then also, I just want to remind folks again, because I want to make sure everyone's able to get this information, and we're going to be breaking out shortly into different groups. So folks can go ahead and make sure you're putting a 1 before your name in your name on Zoom to make sure that we're separating folks into the right groups. Thank you. So not surprisingly, the disparities that have been caused and exacerbated by the pandemic are neither new nor undesigned. In addition to the stark inequities that have been created by the pandemic, structural inequities and systemic racism have laid the foundation for and continue to perpetuate these disparities, putting communities such as EJ communities at even greater risk of harm. So, for example, as many of you may know, those exposed to chronic air pollution are more likely to contract and die from the virus, as harmful pollutants in the air can damage and weaken the lungs and immune system. So if you take a look at this map to the left on the top, you'll see what's called a redlining map or a security map. And these were maps designed in the 1930s by a federal government agency, and they essentially determine the value of a community and who and where banks could lend out mortgages. So these were based largely on race and socioeconomic factors. And the areas that are coded in red and yellow were deemed the most risky or undesirable. So that means like banks weren't able to give out loans to folks in these areas, or they were given, you know, at substantially higher interest rates or things of that matter. So if you look at the map on the right, you'll see a Callen-Bryle screen map, which rates communities based on environmental and socioeconomic burden. So the areas of the map that are colored in red and orange bear greater environmental burdens and face poor socioeconomic and health outcomes, such as higher unemployment, lower, you know, average or median income, and maybe higher rates of asthma and things of the sort. Lastly, if you look at the bottom map, you'll see an LA County map of coronavirus cases. and the darker blue areas indicate the greater number of cases. So as you may notice, the darker colors on all three maps overlap quite a bit. So this kind of demonstrates the lasting impact that policies from nearly 100 years ago still have on our community today. Next slide, please. So sadly, while Black, brown, and low-income folks have faced legacies of oppression, there's still many forces and powers in place that continue to threaten the safety and well-being of our communities. For example, the Trump administration, as well as some states, plan to and have already rolled back a number of environmental regulations that are critical to protecting the health and safety of frontline communities. This includes allowing nuclear power plants to delay inspections and maintenance, and reducing monitoring, environmental review, and enforcement rules under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Additionally, these same communities are facing severe housing pressures and insecurity, which again, Grecia did touch on. And this is impacting everyone, but again, it's impacting, folks differently based on race and socioeconomic status. So despite many places, including California, enacting protections for renters and homeowners, such as rent deferral, Black and Latino people have been approved for these deferrals at far lower rates than their white counterparts, meaning these residents are risking losing their homes in the midst of the pandemic. So while 9% of white homeowners with a mortgage missed or deferred their mortgage payment last month, a shocking 20% of Black homeowners did so. Next slide, please. So despite all of these pressures on our community, as we just saw with the civil uprisings that coincided with this crazy, public health crisis, our communities have historically and continue to rise to the occasion and fight for better policies for our families and our neighbors. So in the face of inadequate support by local, state, and federal government, many communities have stepped up and organized themselves to adequately respond to the crisis and support the most vulnerable in their community. Today we'll discuss a bit more about this in just a moment. Additionally, in addition to advocating for better policies before the pandemic, we're now also fighting for policies to protect our communities in the midst of the pandemic and ensure a just recovery, which you'll be able to go a bit more into tomorrow. But for example, at the state level, AB 345, which some of you may have, testified for last week, was introduced last year, and this would establish a health and safety buffer between oil and gas operations near sensitive.
Jasmine, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Jasmine?
All right, so we just have some brief technical difficulties whilst we wait for Jasmine to get back online. All right.
So Jasmine's phone dropped and she will be back shortly. So just want to really appreciate the beautiful presentation she created and really highlight some of the people-powered policies that Jasmine was talking about. AB 345, AB 1436, specifically on rent relief and banning evictions, oil and gas setbacks. Jasmine, are you back?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to finish up?
Sure. Where were you? It sounded like you were talking about the AB 345.
Yeah, if you could talk more about the people-powered policies, that would be good. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Okay. Again, so sorry about that, folks. Not sure what happened there. But very quickly, so we can go ahead and catch back up. Before the pandemic, we were advocating for policies to protect our communities. And in the midst of the pandemic, we're creating and fighting for additional policies to ensure a just recovery as we're coming out of it. So policies such as 345, AB 345, which they began to discuss, would establish a health and safety buffer between oil and gas operations near sensitive uses. And this is critical even prior to the pandemic because these, operations were harmful to health. And now, especially during the pandemic, folks are stuck at home and unfortunately are being exposed to these harmful pollutants even more. Additionally, AB 1436 was introduced a few months ago in response to the pandemic, and it would prevent anyone from being evicted due to unpaid rent during the pandemic. It would also provide mortgage relief for low-income homeowners and prevent rent debt from damaging people's credit. So policies like these are important tools to help ensure that those who are already being greatly impacted by the pandemic don't have to endure further harm because of it. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it back off to Tere to talk about some of the initiatives that communities have undertaken, which was the mutual aid portion that I'm not sure if Tere was able to touch on, but she can definitely go into further detail because coupling these community-powered initiatives are just as critical as statewide policies.
Next slide, please. Could someone put it to the next? Okay. So we all know that as environmental justice communities, a lot of the solutions that are helpful in our neighborhoods are the ones that come from us, right? We speak for ourselves and we believe in bottom-up solutions as the only solutions that are acceptable in our neighborhoods for our health, for our families, for our communities. We know that working better together to support each other is important. And then when I take care of you, I take care of myself and vice versa, right? And I think all these opportunities for us to be supportive of each other and help each other have arisen during this pandemic, during these times of uprising against all the isms. And so the way that we're seeing this, experiencing it personally at Poder and seeing this across the strait is with mutual aid, people helping each other with groceries, with prepared food, with toiletries, with cleaning supplies, just helping each other just get by every day. Also growing our own food and medicine locally. I know at Poder, we are growing food at Hummingbird Farm at an even higher pace because of the need that's out there. Supporting local businesses, reclaiming our economies, figuring out how we need to keep our monies in our neighborhoods and support each other, right? Even if we're paying a little bit more so that we are reclaiming our local economies. Bartering, trading, recycling, repurposing. This is nothing new to our communities, but how instead of just continuing to fuel the fossil fuel economy and just buying and throwing away, because we know the garbage ends up in our backyards. How are we better at, valuing the important things in life? Creating funds like the Undocu Fund that we've created here in San Francisco in collaboration with other organizations so that folks who don't have access to stimulus money are able to get something, right? Because we're coming together and ensuring that we're taking care of all of us. I know in the previous picture, we had a picture of one of our members, Emily Tricia, who's part of VCs del Pueblo, and creating bike brigades so that when we are delivering our food, when we are supporting our families, we have alternative ways of commuting that aren't contributing to fossil fuels. I know a lot of us have been a part of mask sewing circles to make sure everyone has a mask. Organizing for moratorium on rent and mortgages has been successful from the city level to the statewide level. And then just organizing. We know as environmental justice organizations that this is what has gotten wins in our communities to create green zones, to green up a lot of the toxic pollution that has been put in our communities. Like we saw previously in the maps that Jasmine showed us, like our communities were zoned for hazards, right? And that's why a lot of us are sick and we see those with COVID. And so we just have to continue organizing to advocate for ourselves. And also, like, how are we taking care of ourselves? How are we eating healthy? How are we exercising? How are we going outside? How are we making sure we're not isolating ourselves? Because we know that unity is power, and that when we work together, we're able to be stronger and have wins. And so these are just some of the things that we've been seeing across the state. And now we're gonna break up into some groups. We're gonna have some small group discussions. There's gonna be 4 to 5 groups of 20 to 30 people. For Spanish speaking participants, we are going to mix into groups led by myself, Grecia, and Italia, and these facilitators will provide interpretation in both Spanish and English. Each group can select 1 to 2 of the 4 questions to answer. When you get into your groups, have everyone do a quick name and org introduction over the Zoom chat feature. Don't do it out loud because we know it's gonna take forever and cut into our discussion time. And then for the last 3 minutes of your discussion, choose 1 person to report out and discuss 1 to 2 points to highlight. Our 4 discussion questions are gonna be as follows. Everyone please just choose 1 to 2 in your group. Question 1, community resiliency against COVID. What are some good community solutions, including community-led mutual aid systems that are working or not working to address our needs during this time of crisis? If we want to share examples of mutual aid in which our neighbors have helped each other, that would be beautiful. Question 2, how has housing become an issue during this crisis? What are some housing-related issues that your communities have been experiencing across? And how have you or your organizations worked to address these local issues? Question 3, how has our local organizing changed due to COVID? What are effective strategies for engaging in local and regional decision-making and issues? And what additional support or solutions are needed? And then question 4, how are we able to achieve individual resilience during this time of COVID? So what are the best practices for emotional, physical, mental, spiritual well-being and connectivity? What are our everyday ways to build our resiliency? And so excited, I'm gonna be one of your facilitators. Thankful for the whole logistics team who's gonna break us up into different chat rooms. Like I said, there's gonna be 5. And so thank you. I think we're gonna be breaking out into chat rooms now. Give us a few minutes. It feels like there's over 154 of us, which is beautiful, but it's gonna take a minute to get us into our discussion groups, but excited to be in them. And please remember, if you are Spanish speaking, put a 1 in front of your name. That comes up on the screen.
Okay, I'll need about 5 more minutes or so. Like Tere mentioned, there's currently 152 people. I appreciate your patience and your grace. If you'd like to take about 2 minutes or so to grab some water, that would be really helpful.
And for those still on, the discussion questions just got on the screen if you need to see them. But excited to be in our chat rooms shortly.
Okay, folks, you should start getting invitations to join the breakout room. Please go ahead and join. Some folk will take a little longer because I'm still working through, but others can join.
So I think this is the main room for folks who may not have had the opportunity to join a breakout room. I'm wondering if maybe we can do a facilitation, if there's someone who can lead.
Casey, I think I was supposed to be broken into a group, right? Or am I in this group?
Yeah, so you might have to move your computer screen a little bit to see a pop-up that should have shown for you to join the breakout room. So it should say that you were assigned a breakout room, and then if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a breakout room button. It's the third over from the right, I think, and you can maybe click on that to join.
Good morning.
So it sounds like folks here. So what you might want to do is like you could press this, if you're on a computer, you can maybe press the escape button and kind of look for your breakout room invitation.
Good morning. I'm in my cell phone.
You're on your cell phone. So
Yes,
yeah, you should still be able to join the breakout room from your cell phone.
okay, sure. I just saw the text, so let me see.
What kind of cell phone are you on?
So where should I go on my?
Yeah. So I'm just going to look for some instructions real quick, but you should, yeah, you should see a button that pops up asking you to join a breakout room.
Are you calling in or are you using the app?
Their small group discussion, from their small group discussion. And if it's a Spanish speaking group, we could either interpret or we could have the interpreter speak out and share. So from my group, can we, Leon, do you think you could help highlight some of our discussions? Leon, are you there? I think you might be muted.
Leon won't be able to hear us because they're interpreting right now.
Oh, okay.
So we won't be able to hear them.
Okay, so I could share back from our group. We talked about housing and the importance of housing because so many people are facing evictions right now. And just really like how housing is interconnected with everything that's going on right now, from, you know, folks not having jobs, from folks not being able to pay for basic necessities, from the fear that exists of losing your home, also how it's all interconnected with wages and rent and jobs, and how really if we're organizing for housing for all, we are able to support people in all those aspects, right? That organizing includes moratorium on mortgages, that organizing includes good, healthy jobs for everybody so that they're able to support themselves with rising costs in food. And so really looking at like the importance of housing as something that brings together or interconnects all the issues happening in our community. So thank you to group one. And so now I wanted to ask if Grecia's group could report back.
Yeah, so we actually had some technical difficulties and I didn't join the group until very, very late. And so only Doña Luz Ronaldo, I think is her last name, or Roldan, perdón, Luz Roldan was able to start sharing. And so I'll just share out because we actually didn't even get to designate who was speaking. But she mentioned that, you know, as people's jobs were being affected from COVID-19, that caused them to, you know, lose income or lose their job entirely and, you know, over time be late on their bills, even if they had some savings. And now, you know, what ends up happening is like, yeah, they may be working again, but they're super behind on all these bills that, you know, is you know, causing a lot of anguish. And so, you know, she's suggested that like one solution she's seen that has helped, you know, it may not help, you know, every problem or everyone entirely, but our programs that have been financially supporting folks and financial, you know, cash assistance programs are able to pay back, you know, whether it's past due bills, utility bills, or rent or whatnot. She was sharing that's something she could see as something very helpful and has helped.
Thank you.
But again, and I want to apologize to my group for joining super, super late. It was a bit of a technical difficulty there, so, but thank you for your patience.
And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of our discussion, and we have hopefully a happy hour to talk more later on in the day, right? And so if we could hear from Jasmine's group of Shareback.
Yep, so we spent a bit of time speaking on question number 3, and I believe Rosemary said that she wants to go ahead and share out for our team. Rosemary still with us? Okay, well, for lack of time, I'll go ahead and share out very quickly, but folks spent a lot of time talking about how technology has really become critical in ensuring that folks are able to engage, but that it's also been a challenge as well because there is a technological divide or gap, and some people don't have access to technology, whether that's not having secure internet access or something of the sort. But also folks just don't know how to use technology. And so also the importance of building that capacity in order to build resistance in the community. So some folks, they talk about how they've made a shift to teaching residents and building that capacity, such as in the SBLA Push Project in South Central, through PSR. And then, I'm sorry, Gwen, I don't remember what organization you're with, but CEJA, sorry. But talking about the SOMA program and being able to use technology to fill that gap as well. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add, maybe a sentence or two, but that I think was a very meaningful and helpful conversation that, again, I also hope we can continue.
Yes, but I stay, I stay doing what you may call it, school. I got computer classes to learn. I got electric tech. I got English, and I have electricity right now. So I'm very busy. I don't care. It's not going to stop me if I don't know how to use the technology. And I'm almost done in 2 weeks. And I'm getting fall classes again for Canvas electric tech. I did it. I'm 50 years old. I'm doing it no matter what. On my phone, whatever. I ask. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Rosemary. Could we hear now from Tiffany's group?
Hi, my name is Monica. I'm representing Tiffany's group. So we talked a little bit about both the challenges and some things that are working in organizing through COVID. Definitely, as we heard before, the digital barriers exist, and we've had some issues, whether it's Zoom or Google messaging. Andrea shared that participating in the public process has had extra barriers, especially for those who are trying to make their voice heard. If they speak other languages, that there is oftentimes only instances where they're able to listen, but not able to actually give their comment. And it just, on the other side, those industry interests are able to join and give their time, and they obviously, they don't have the same barriers that the community members do. And then we've heard from some of, the wins and successes that we've had. We've had funders that have stepped up and have worked with us to make funding unrestricted. So we are a lot more flexible in how we use the funds to adapt to more immediate needs from the community, and to make our own staff more safe too while doing it. And that we've also seen car caravans to bring attention to different issues, whether it was the eviction moratorium, rent strikes, the census, but just that was one way that community members could participate and still keep social distance and stay safe. And we've also had special trainings that were just on how to use more digital tools, lending out tablets to community members and getting everybody trained up, giving dedicated time just to talk about the issues that people are seeing with joining and addressing those.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Monica. And now finally, if we could hear from Italia's group.
Sure, we have Esperanza reporting back.
Hola, ¿sí me escuchan?
Sí.
Sí. Ok. Bueno, nosotros nos tocó la pregunta 4 y también tuvimos poco tiempo, y era como la resiliencia individual durante esta pandemia, ¿verdad? Alguna compañera, ella comenta que ella no dejó de trabajar, ella sigue trabajando, pero sí dejó de ver televisión. Sí se entera por las noticias, pero no mira tanto del COVID. ¿Por qué? Porque se estresa más la mente, ¿verdad? Otro compañero, él comenta de que ellos se van a lo espiritual, a la iglesia también, y eso ayuda mucho. Yo, por ejemplo, en lo personal, yo me dediqué de lleno mucho al jardín, a caminar. Como se extendió la pandemia, pues hice mi rutina de caminar en la mañana, el jardín y comida, recetas, familia. Es lo que estamos haciendo. Mucha gente está dedicada mucho a hacer las recetas, a hacer panes. Y enterarse de las noticias, ¿verdad? A ver cómo está fluyendo los acontecimientos actuales. Y bueno, es todo. Gracias.
Is someone going to translate from the group?
Sure, I can translate. So Esperanza was sharing, reporting back from our group that some of the ways that members have been dealing, you know, in the spiritual and mental health component during this pandemic is someone has opted out. They haven't lost their job, but they have opted out from being active listeners of the news because they brought a lot of anxiety for them. And so that has helped them. Other community members have shared that they are definitely keeping their faith strong and keeping their relationships with their faith communities strongly. And then Esperanza shared her personal way of coping has been through gardening and being connected with nature.
Thank you. And just want to say that I know some folks didn't get to have a lot of time to discuss because of technical difficulties, but we're hoping that these rich discussions today will continue throughout the day. And we want to remind people that we also are still in relationship with each other and can continue these discussions in the future with CEJA. And if you're super interested in continuing these, then just let us know. Put it in the chat. Also, an announcement, the Just Recovery conversation will be happening tomorrow at Congreso. And in the future, we want to know if folks are interested in having conversations around reparations and you know, what that means for communities, specifically Black communities, environmental justice communities, people of color communities. So just let us know in the chat feature if this is something that you want to be a part of in discussing within our CEJA family. So thank you so much. We're a little over time, but we're excited to plant all these seeds so that we're able to continue to organize together, united, and make the changes that we need to protect our communities and families. So I'm going to pass it on to the next person.
Thank you so much, Tere. Thank you so much, all of the workshop facilitators, Grecia, Tiff, Jasmine, and thank you for joining the COVID and EJ workshop. We're gonna take a quick 10-minute break before we go into our next workshop of kicking off the 2020 elections, Know Your Rights and Vote for a Just Recovery, presented by CEJA Action. Now, once again, during our break, we'll be hearing uplifting movement music provided by DJ Que Madre. And please use this break to take care of yourself, grab some water, a drink, step outside, use our virtual photo booth. I already used it. You can find me there somehow. And please take a photo, share it on Instagram using or other social media using hashtag Congreso 2020 or hashtag Just Recovery. All right, so take it away, DJ Que Madre.
La bamba rebelde, es la bamba rebelde que cantaré porque somos chicanos de East LA, ay arriba y arriba, ay arriba y arriba y arriba iré, yo no creo en fronteras, yo no creo en fronteras, yo cruzaré, yo cruzaré, yo cruzaré. mayores. Esta bamba, señores, la melodía que nos pone en el alma. Que nos pone en el alma nuestra alegría. ¡Ay, arriba, ay, arriba! ¡Ay, arriba, ay, arriba, ay, arriba! Iré, yo no soy marinero. Yo no soy marinero. Soy capitán, soy capitán, soy capitán.
Ya no llores, llorona. Ya no llores, llorona. Mi gente lucha contra leyes racistas. Contra leyes racistas en Arizona. Ahí arriba, ahí arriba. Ahí arriba, de arriba, de arriba. Yo no soy de la migra. Yo no soy de la migra. Yo no seré, yo no seré, yo no seré. Yo sí vengo del Valle de San Gabriel, porque allí nos creamos nuestra familia, allá arriba, allá arriba. Allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba, iré, yo no soy marinero. Yo no soy marinero, soy chicano, soy chicano, soy chicano.
Puedo ser tu hermana, tu hija, Tamara, Pamela o Valentina. Yo puedo ser tu gran amiga, incluso tu compañera de vida. Yo puedo ser tu gran aliada, la que aconseja y la que apaña. Yo puedo ser cualquiera de todos, depende de cómo tú me apodas. Pero no voy a ser la que obedece, porque mi cuerpo me pertenece. Yo decido de mi tiempo como quiero y todo quiero. Independiente yo nací, independiente decidí. Yo no camino detrás de ti, yo camino de la para ti. Tú no me vas a humillar, tú no me vas a gritar, tú no me vas a someter, tú no me vas a golpear, tú no me vas a denigrar, tú no me vas a obligar, tú no me vas a silenciar, tú no me vas a callar. No sumisa ni obediente, mujer fuerte y sonriente, independiente y valiente, rompe la cadena de lo indiferente, no pasiva ni oprimida, mujer linda y vida, emancipada en autonomía, arriba de esta y alegría. A liberar, a liberar.